Today's video topic is a little bit unusual to what I usually make. I just wanted to talk about like a framework that I use to think about reality and how it probably like how it relates to the real world and maybe a little bit of how it has helped me or it's like good to have a framework of this style. So basically, I like to interpret the world as an RPG. So what do I mean by that? Basically, what I'm trying to say is that I use it kind of like in a way to make sense of like the way things are. I don't think I've been doing this for like ever, but I think I started doing this nearly around the time that I was 15, which is funny because I don't really play that many RPGs. I played maybe Skyrim, maybe Twilight Princess. I used to play Adventure Quest Worlds online as well. Terraria, if you consider that an RPG, obviously from the footage. But basically, the way that it works for me is that I kind of use it as a way to make sense of reality and specific points in life. For example, I think people have classes. I think a good way to explain the class system would be, I don't think it's like personality or anything like that, but think of it like, or even like the job that you do. But the way that I like to think of it is kind of like the way that you interact with problems in the real world. I would say, like my mom, for example, the way that she interacts with problems in the world is usually by inspiring people around her and getting everybody on board to like dealing with the same problem. So I would say her class is more likely to be similar to a bard because she just kind of boosts people and like empower them in order to deal with problems. So it's kind of like a bard casting inspiration. I like to think I like to think the same way like my dad, for example. I think his class is more like a knight. He has like a shield and a sword, and he just minimizes the damage that he takes from fights while also making sure that he does consistent damage. So he's just a consistent attrition class, I would say. Yeah, the way that I operate, for example, I'm more of a rogue, but I would say it's like one of those rogues that like maximize as much damage as they can in like a single hit. So for example, I spend a lot of time looking for weaknesses in my situation and then I just strike decisively. So the way that that works, for example, is I will spend a lot of time with like a task on hand, and like I would spend most of my time thinking about the task. And when I decide to take the task on, it will take like very little effort because I've already mapped out like everything. So that's the way that people kind of like relate to classes in the way that I think about it. Some people can multi-class. I like to think of myself more of a rogue that's also a bard because I am able to like inspire myself or inspire others when I have to work in projects. I think like granting myself buffs or granting others buffs when they have to deal with specific situations is something that means it's more of a inspiration type class. So I would say maybe more something like a rogue hybrid with paladin or a rogue hybrid with bard, for example. That would be like my class. Anyways, that's how I think of like classes. Like there are some people that have casters as well, people that are more in director type roles that give other people tasks would be like summoners. I think casters would be like people that are able to deal with a lot of tasks simultaneously at the same time. Things like that. There's just like, or berserks would be people that are able to put more strength into like a task for a long period of time and then they crash. So things like that. In the same way, I think there are bosses. I think bosses, I consider them something more like skill checks for specific classes. So an idea for a boss would be it's dependent on the class as well because as you can see if you play like a game, let's say like you play a game like Elden Ring and you play against that, you're playing like a caster class. If you're playing a caster, you're gonna have way more trouble beating that one girl that lets you multi-class. I forget her name. I think it's like Renala or something. She's gonna give you way more trouble if you're playing like a class that relies more on like sorceries and faiths. But if you play a class, for example, like dexterity class or a strength class, she's like one of the easiest bosses. So in the same way, when you look at specific situations that you need to do, you can think of different bosses that you have, and they can be different depending on the class that you have. Just like Renala, I think is her name, it's like easier if you are a strength class. At the same time, my dad, for example, he works in hotels, hospitality, so like the new year or like events like that are really they're really intensive for them because they have to make sure that like nothing goes wrong, everybody's happy. There's like a lot that can go wrong in events like that. So that would be like a boss for him. He's able to deal with situations as fast as he can, and that is difficult for classes like him because he's a nutrition class, like I said. So dealing with situations spontaneously is not the thing that he's best at, but is something that he can do. A class like me, for example, I would have more trouble with something such as multiple events falling on me at the same time because like I said, I spend a lot of time on like a single event, but then I strike decisively. So if I was to spend like if a lot of events follow me, I guess like a boss for me would be like multiple enemies just like falling at the same time as opposed to just like a single big baddie. Yeah, but there's like different things like that. I imagine, for example, like a person that has more of a temperament like a summoner and they have to deal with like multiple things, it would be something like a distraction that distracts all their summons, for example. Or it would be more something like maybe an illness or something that like diminishes the amount of people that they can command at a time, things like that. Or like for example like a bard, it would be something that also just like lowers the morale of the people for like an extended period of time, something like that. So different classes have different things that they're good and bad at. Yeah, so that's basically what I think about bosses in life or in this framework. I think dungeons would be something like it's like a temporary period where you have a clear start and a clear end. So something more and basically something that takes more of your focus, and it's something that prevents you from like remaining in the open world. This is not like a bad thing necessarily. So if you think of a dungeon, you could think of something such as let's say like like crunch time from your work. If you're like a developer or something like that, basically when you have to crunch on a project, that would be something that takes most of your effort, and that's something that is just like basically like your big focus. It's basically like the thing that keeps you engaged in that activity in particular. Another thing would be, for example, university is one of them, because university just requires you to be focused on university. I don't think stuff like work, for example, could constitute a dungeon, but I think several examples of things at work could be a dungeon. So things, for example, like I said, like being in crunch, or like how teachers, for example, have to correct exams at the end of like an academic period. So teachers will correct exams, and that's like a dungeon because a lot of their that's what takes a lot of their time and mental focus. Dungeons usually mean they go for a long time and there are low breaks, and there's also depletion of stats such as HP, because think for example like a Persona Palace. I don't know about you guys, but I like to do them in one sitting and then just like get to the point where I can progress, and then just during the time that I'm doing it, I tend to, the longer I progress in the dungeon, the less stats I have, because obviously you are using your health, you're using your, I don't know what they call their mana. It's like SP. I guess they call it like spirit points. I don't know. But something like that. You're using your mana, you're using your health. You get like bonfires, for example, in Elden Ring or Dark Souls. Or you get like those rooms where you can like rest in Persona. Usually you get some of those in dungeons as well. Or you might have to craft them. Like things, think of like breaks that you take, or think of like times where, okay, maybe the project is like chill right now, so maybe we don't need to like focus as much on it, or like, oh, the game that we were working on now, the programming is done, so it's like the artist job, so the programming team can like chill a little bit. So that's like a bonfire in that situation. Dungeons can go for a really long time, so it can cause like burnout if you think about it. It just can cause burnout if you don't pace them correctly. So you have to take your time with this. So it's things like I said, this is just a metaphor. So if you think of things like school, school is something that you, it's like consistent effort, but when you have a break or something, take some time to relax. If you're able to get like a break from your university and you think you need it, also do that. Bosses, like I said in the past, they're more like stat checks. Basically, you get to a point where, oh, okay, this situation is gonna be difficult. That's what a boss is. It's just like a situation that might be difficult for your class. So, another thing, I like to think of people as party members. So, if you have a party member, or if you have a party, so if you have a party and you're going to a dungeon, you might have, depending on the dungeon that it is, let's say it's your job, for example, you get like a party of people that are particularly qualified for something. Let's say I said it earlier that classes are not necessarily uh, how you interact with like your job or anything like that. It's more like how you interact with the world. So if you have a job that does like a specific thing, you typically tend to have people that are good at specific things. That's to say, for example, let's say that you're in university, and the university you're studying is like you're doing a business program, for example. If you're doing business, or let's if you're doing business, you can expect more of the people that you're with to be more knowledgeable about like leadership and branding and things like that. So if you that dungeon, your party is mostly composed of people that already have a certain amount of competence in that field. It could be, for example, that you have more summoners in that build, or in that party. Or it could be, for example, that you have the one guy that's like a healer in that party. Usually they are around everywhere. You have people that are just like, you have people everywhere in the world that are just healers. Even if they multi-class, they just kind of like make things more bearable, I would say. So yeah, things like that. I think that's like a party composition. If you think about it, a party formed by work is technically like a mercenary band, because they are all just paid to be there and do their work. So yeah, you have like different parties. For example, if you're in a relationship, it could be like, think of it like when you play a multiplayer game with people and you play with a friend, or like if you're in a relationship, it's like playing with some of those people. Like, you just do quests together, you do like jobs together. For example, when I play GTA with my friend, we kind of like sell our businesses together. We kind of do heists together every now and then. We just generate money together. And then every now and then he'll be like, "Oh, okay, I need to do this mission alone." So you can like go do your own thing. Or I might play on my own. So it's kind of like the same way when you have like a partner. It's just kind of like you guys tackle similar things, but individually you have your own thing as well. So I think that's kind of what party composition would be like. So grinding is another thing. Grinding, I would say it's like intentionally improving a skill with ROI. What's ROI? It's return on investment. So basically, it's when you are perfecting a skill or you're trying to like get better at a skill, that's considered grinding. It's different from some time that you recover or some time that you have fun. Let's say I like to think of most things as skills. Basically, if I play a video game, let's say I play League, like my skill, I would have skills in League that transfer to other things. So, for example, map presence or map awareness, I would say, or things like that. That can be transferred to like other things, like awareness in real life to other tasks. Maybe not as strongly. It's maybe like a very small correlation, but it could be something like that, for example. Or like coordination, if I play a shooter, could be like something that is improving. So when I do something like more mechanical tasks, such as like engineering, like with small things, or like maybe drumming, or maybe art, those are things that I am typically better at with those things. Or if I play like turn-based RPGs, technically my planning skills are improving because sometimes I get put in situations that are more difficult and I have to take out time depending on the game. I saw like a guy that pulled out a calculator to play Darkest Dungeon. That was kind of crazy. I'm not gonna lie. He was like calculating buffs, but that was before they changed it. So I think now you have a limited amount of skills that you have per fight. But back then he was like buffing his character to hell so that he could like one shot the final boss. I might link that video in the end in the description. That one was a funny one. I don't know if it's still up. I'll have to search it. But yeah, so what I'm trying to say is like there are skills and sometimes your skills might correlate. Sometimes you might be doing something for fun and you can be like upgrading a skill and you don't know it. So think for example, if I'm playing with my friends, let's say I'm playing with my friends, I'm playing I don't know, I'm playing League, like I was saying. So League is increasing my ability to think of multiple things and think outside of my own situation and look at what other people are doing and optimize the situation to the current events that are happening. So there are some skills that I'm leveling up by playing League. There are some skills like it's kind of like it doesn't necessarily mean it's something that is like necessarily useful. Like for example, there are just some skills that you have that are completely useless that just for some reason you have them. Like I don't know, if you play like RuneScape for example and you like fishing, you might level up your fishing even if you don't necessarily use fishing for like anything else than just it's fun to you. So sometimes grinding can be improving like a skill that works. It can be like, oh, I'm gonna learn a language, I'm gonna learn something related to like a degree that I want to pursue. So those are skills. Those are like that's grinding towards a goal that you find as improvement. But there is also grinding towards like just leveling up like random stats, like I said. Like I'm never gonna be a CS professional, for example, but I can still play CS. I can still rank up. I can still get like a pretty high rank. Like even if I'm global elite, I'm not gonna necessarily be a pro. So just because I'm good at a game doesn't mean I have to like specialize at it. It just means I have a skill. So that's what grinding is. It doesn't necessarily have to be that everything you do is grinding. Like if you go to the beach, for example, with the boys and you just want to like hang out and you just that's all you do. That's like chilling. That's also grinding. That's why I think things like scrolling social media don't really fulfill me because I just kind of like look at it like I'm just wasting time. I don't really enjoy what I'm doing and I'm not even like perfecting any skills. But that's just personal take. That's not necessarily anything here or there. So now about like tutorials. I think the world has tutorial zones. I think if you think of like a normal MMO, you have zones, or just like RPGs, you have zones. You have like the famous swamp, for example. If you play like the Souls, like Dark Souls or Elden Ring, or you have the crypt, you have the forest, you have the water world, things like that. So you have different zones in real life. And I would say, for example, the environment that you are kind of like puts you in that zone. So it would be like, for example, like let's say you are, it's this, how do I explain this? You live in like the tropic, for example, but if you're working hotels, then your zone would be like the tropical zone or like the water world. But if you like, you being in that zone doesn't necessarily mean you have to fight the same thing. So you don't have to be like a fisherman just because you live in the water world, or you don't have to work in shipping. You can be like, for example, like like you can work in excursions, for example, or something like that. So you have different zones where you grind that are geographical zones, but then you have what I would call tutorial zones, or like specified zones. So, for example, if I live in a tutorial zone, a good tutorial zone would be school. Like that's a starter. When you're born, you're already in the open world. When you go to school, that's kind of like a structured dungeon that you use in the long term, or that you partake in the long term. And it's just kind of like an environment where we structure the situation to limit the amount of failure. I think we gave that to like kids mostly, just to like, I mean, obviously we give it to kids, but like it's mostly to reduce the chance of failure. We have some leeway that we give the kids. But there's also like university would also be like a tutorial zone. In that case, it's more open. You are more in a controlled environment where failing is more likely, but it also doesn't have devastating consequences, presumably. So that's like a structure thing. Something like an internship, for example, would be like another tutorial zone, because they kind of teach you how to do things before they like release you. In the end, you can live your entire life just moving between like zone to zone, because if you think about it, your job is technically a tutorial zone. Very few people actually have a job that is in the open world. So a lot of people just have jobs that are structured. They have a specific time that they show up to work. They have a specific time that they go home. That's fine. That's perfectly normal. So you can spend your entire life living in zones, and just like the time that you have outside of work, that's when you actually enjoy the open world for what it is, or you partake in it. I would say doesn't necessarily mean that like you don't do that just because you do the other. Some people just prefer having padding into like the things that they do, or it is just like, it is what it is, like having some level of structure. That's fine. That's just what I like to call a zone, or like a tutorial zone, because the tutorial is where you have some level of okay, you failed, it's not catastrophic. The zone itself would just be like, okay, so you work in this situation, this is the structure that we give you. It's kind of like, think of it as being on rails in a game. So now, for like buffs and debuffs, I kind of alluded to this earlier when I was talking about inspiration. There are things in the world that can affect your base stats as they are. So think of things like illness, for example, or chronic stress, or think of like, for example, if you break up with your girlfriend, that's like heartbreak. So if you think about like those things, they affect how you react with like other things. So your stats are lower. Like, let's say, for example, my let's say my perception is usually pretty high, but I've been kind of like out of it because I'm sick. So that would mean that my perception stat is lower. So when I do perception checks, I'm worse. Those are temporary. Some of them can be permanent, but temporarily these are things that just like affect the way that you interact with your stats. Some of like I said, some of them can be permanent. Like for example, blindness. If you just go blind, that's like a permanent debuff. Like you used to have that ability, now that ability's gone. So like it's just like a permanent debuff. Or like losing an arm, or it doesn't even have to be like that drastic. It can just be like, for example, you used to be able to do this skill and now you don't have it. It's like a permanent debuff until you get the skill again. Like for example, when you speak like languages and you don't speak the language for a long time, you kind of like forget it. Like I used to be able to read Russian, I can't read it anymore. That's kind of like the type of things that I'm talking about. Is just like abilities that you those permanent debuffs are the abilities that you had that you just lost. And temporary buffs would be things like, for example, or like for permanent, something like trauma, for example, would be something like that. But temporary would be something like, for example, more for the moment. I I don't know. I got my eyes dilated because I went to the ophthalmologist. So now I have the not the permanent. I have the temporary debuff that I can't see and I can't drive because of it. So things like that. Or you know, oh, I stubbed my toe, so now I can't run. So that's like a like I hit my toe really hard. I stepped on it. I guess somebody stepped on it. Like a massive person stepped on it, like some like pretty heavy person, and now I can't run because my foot hurts. Or I just like I don't know, I have like an ingrown nail. Those are like temporary debuffs. Anyways, I'm gonna move on from this because this is getting kind of long for me talking about debuffs. But buffs would be something like I think buffs are more rare. Mostly you rely on buffs from people like mentors or some like some sort of support, because a buff would be something like that improves your skills, and there's not very many things that do that in the world. So it would be like, for example, um I guess like think of like a mentor would be a buff. They teach you how to do things and they improve your ability, and like your learning becomes faster. So a mentor would be like a buff. Another thing that can buff you, maybe spending time with your friends is something that would buff your mental clarity, for example. So that's another buff that you can have. Things like that, they're just things that increase your skills. But like I said, it's kind of like difficult for you to get buffs in real life. Like if you stub your toe, for example, or you have the ingrown nail, you just can't run. Like your speed is reduced for a while. But like, what are you gonna do to run faster without training? Like you have skills, but you don't have like that many things that like increase your speed for like a very low amount of time, unless you do steroids, but don't do that. So there aren't very many things that buff you for like a limited amount of time. So now moving on to like quests. I think quests are you can think of quests like events or things that you have to do. So for example, in an RPG, you would have like a quest giver, and you can get them like anywhere. It can be like a guild, or it can be like some random person that you come across, or it can just be like a thing that you decide to do for yourself. Quests, even in video games and in real life, they just come from like anywhere. So when you think about a quest in or it could just be like society as well, or your family, or like a random event. So I like to think of like quests as like one of things that you do, and you can have quest chains as well, which are like a bunch of things that you have to do. So let's say I have to, for example, let's say I have to get my ID, or not my ID, my driver's license. So let's say I have to get my driver's license. That's a quest. So the quest would be a bunch of tasks. For the quest chain would be, this is more like a quest chain, because the quest would rely on me first going, taking all my documents, and then presenting all my documents, and then taking the written test, and then waiting, and then going again with all my documents, and then taking the driver test, like the driving one, and then you get your driver's license. So that's a short quest chain that you have. But then a quest would be like, for example, I'm going to go to the store and buy milk. So I go to the store, and why are all my examples about buying milk? Anyways, I go to the store, I buy milk, and that's like the whole quest. That would be like a quest. Or like, for example, I'm gonna fold my laundry. That's another quest that is just something that you have to do, and it's done. Some quests come from you, like for example, or some quests come from the world. So for example, folding my laundry, I guess you could say it comes from the world, just because you're wearing clothes, and those clothes get dirty, and then you have to clean them, and then you have to fold them. Or it could be like more specific quests, like, oh, I need to stock on this specific item because there's a hurricane coming. I have enough of that item, but I don't have enough if there's a hurricane and there's no energy, for example. So that's like a type of quest that is given by the environment. Or it can just be like something as simple as like your friend telling you like, "Hey, we have a party. If you want to come, make sure to bring some chips." So then you have to bring the chips to the party. And then that's like a quest that was given to you by a friend. Sometimes it can be like something more specific, like your wife tells you to fix the sink, for example. That's like a very specific quest that was given to you as well. Yeah, so things like that. So that's what I think quests are. The reason I wanted to talk about this is because there are many different frameworks that people can have. I think some frameworks are different from mine, can be like different ways to interpret the world. I might make a video on that in the future, but because this one's getting a little bit long. But yeah, those are just like things that kind of like can help you. Like sometimes when I lean on this, it's more situations where I get more stressed. So I like to think of like the world as like a system, and I think the world, like the system that I thought of seeing the world as an RPG, even though I don't do it intentionally, it does give me more agency over my own life, because I think of like most things as things that I have control over. I think that's kind of how it works. But yeah, there are different ways that you can do it. I mean, this video already makes me sound kind of schizo, so I'm not gonna really go into like, this is just like a way that I like to think of things. I think it's interesting to talk about it because I know not everybody sees the world the same way. But yeah, that's the video, I guess. Anyways, see ya.